Out at the fruit tree this morning, the leaves are curling, the new growth is sticky, and a steady line of ants is marching straight up the trunk like they own the place. Spray something on them, and they're back within a day. Crush the ones you can reach, and twice as many show up the next morning. That tree you were counting on for a good crop this year is feeding everything except you. Here's what nobody tells you. The ants aren't your actual problem. The ants are the sign of the problem. Wherever you find ants marching up a trunk, you'll almost always find aphids up in the leaves, and the two are working together. Aphids feed on your tree and leave behind a sweet, sticky residue, and the ants farm them for it, protecting them, even carrying them out to fresh, new growth. Kill off the ants you can see, and you've done nothing whatsoever about the herd they're tending up above. You have to break both, the road they travel and the herd they're protecting. That's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do. I'm Naomi Yoder, and I keep house and garden here in Lancaster County the old way, the way it was handed down to me through my family. 3 methods that stack together. Here's how it's done. There are 3 methods, and each one builds on the last. The first 2 keep pests from ever reaching the tree in the first place. The third clears up anything that's already made it in. Method 1, the sticky barrier. This is the roadblock. The idea is simple enough. Ants and crawling insects can't fly, so they have to climb the trunk to reach the tree. Put a band around that trunk they physically cannot cross, and they reach it since they can't continue, and turn back the way they came. Here's how you build it. Take a clean, dry cloth roughly a hand's width wide, about 15 inches across and a foot tall, adjusted to your trunk's thickness. A bigger tree needs more cloth, a smaller one less. Fold the cloth over on itself several times until you've got a band around 2 inches wide. That width matters, because the plastic collar you're about to add needs to stand up above the cloth for the whole barrier to actually function. Wrap the folded cloth snugly around the trunk, about a foot up from the ground, and secure it firmly. Wind wire or a zip tie around it and tighten with pliers until it can't slip. Now the slippery collar itself. Take a plastic bottle and cut about 4 inches off the flattest part of the side with one straight cut so you can open the piece out flat. Wrap that flattened piece around the cloth band so it stands out a little above it, like a small skirt circling the trunk. Secure it with another wire or tie so it stays steady and doesn't shift. Pay close attention here. Make sure no branches, shoots, or tall weeds are touching the trunk anywhere above your barrier, because anything leaning against the bark above your band hands the ants a bridge straight around all your work. Now for the part that actually does the work. Coat the inside face of that plastic skirt with something slick enough that nothing can cross it. Used cooking oil works fine. Old frying oil, olive oil, whatever you've got on hand to reuse. Petroleum jelly works too, as does plain grease. Any thick, greasy substance that leaves no foothold for an insect to grip. Lay a generous coat all the way around the inside of the plastic. Check it about once a week to keep it effective. Wind, rain, and dust wear the coating down over time, but a weekly glance is generally enough. If the surface has dried out or lost its slickness, just wipe on more oil or jelly. That's the complete first method, and on its own, it stops the marching cold. Method 2, a second wall on the ground. This second method is even simpler, and it builds a further barrier the pests have to cross before they even reach the trunk. For this, you use diatomaceous earth, a fine, pale dust that's been used around growing things for a very long time. It's easy to find, inexpensive, and gentle on both the soil and the plant itself. It doesn't alter your soil chemistry or harm your tree in any way. What it does to a soft-bodied insect, though, is an entirely different matter. You use it to lay a ring on the ground. Take a handful and pour it in a continuous, unbroken ridge all the way around the base of the tree, or around the pot if it's a potted tree, a complete circle with no gaps anywhere. If your tree is planted in the ground, lay it directly on the soil circling the base. The goal is a wall the insect has to physically cross to reach the trunk at all. Here's why it works. That dust is far finer and sharper than it appears, and when a crawling insect passes through it, it clings to the body and scuffs at the hard exoskeleton, and the creature dries out before long. To an ant or an aphid, it's harsh, hostile ground they'd rather avoid entirely. That's exactly what makes it so effective against ants, aphids, and nearly any crawling pest you're dealing with. The one catch with diatomaceous earth is rain. Once it gets wet, it clumps together and loses much of its effectiveness, though it works again once it dries back out. So, after any hard rain, refresh the ring, lay down a fresh handful, and you're back in business. Between the sticky band up the trunk and this dust ring on the ground, very little manages to reach your tree at all. Method 3. Clearing out what's already there. Now, the third method, for when pests have already made it up into the tree. The first two methods keep pests out entirely, but if you're watching this because your leaves are already curled and your new shoots already covered, this is the one that actually clears the problem. It uses the same diatomaceous earth, this time made into a spray. Mix 1 tablespoon of diatomaceous earth into a quart of water, roughly a tablespoon per quart, a bit more for a full gallon, and stir thoroughly until it's evenly mixed with nothing settling out. Pour that into a spray bottle and spray it directly onto the trouble spots, the curled leaves, the tender new shoots, anywhere you see aphids or other soft-bodied pests gathered. Coat them thoroughly. Here's the part you need to understand, or you'll assume it failed. Right after spraying, nothing much happens. The bugs just sit there. That's completely normal. Don't spray again thinking it didn't take. The real work begins as the spray dries. Once the water evaporates off, that fine dust is left clinging to their bodies, and that's when it actually starts doing its job. Give it about 3 days. In my own experience, you'll see the great majority of them gone within that window. Not every last one, but very nearly all of it. Spray, wait, let it dry and work, and check back on the 3rd day. Putting it all together. So that's the whole method. Block the road up the trunk with the oiled collar. Lay the dust ring on the ground as a second wall. And if pests are already established in the tree, spray the dust and water mixture and give it 3 days to work. Do all 3, keep them maintained after rainfall, and you take your tree back. Who would rather you bought your way out of this? Let me tell you who'd prefer you skip all this and reach for a bottle instead. Walk into any garden store come spring and look at the shelf of insecticides, bottle after colorful bottle, each one promising to eliminate everything, each price to sell, and most needing to be repurchased again next month, and the month after that. A cloth, a cut-up plastic bottle, a jar of old frying oil, and a bag of plain dust that costs a few dollars and lasts a whole season doesn't sell anybody a shelf full of bottles every spring. Nobody's scheming this in a back room somewhere. It's worse than a scheme, honestly, because a scheme you could expose and be done with. This is just a system that runs itself. Everything about how pest control gets sold is built around you reaching for a bottle, using it up, and coming back for another. And nobody has to coordinate a thing for it to work exactly that way. The old methods are cheaper and they last because they were worked out by people who couldn't just run to a store, people who had to solve the problem once and properly. You can solve it the exact same way and quietly step off that treadmill entirely. What I'd ask of you. So here's what I'll ask. Tell me down in the comments where in the world you're watching from, what tree or plant you're fighting to protect, and what pest has gotten into it. If you try any of this yourself, come back and tell me how it went, whether the marching stopped, whether the dust ring held up, how the spray performed by the 3rd day. While you're at it, tell me your county and roughly how old your house is. I genuinely love knowing who's out there tending ground and what kind of garden you're keeping. And don't wait for an infestation to take hold before acting. The best time to wrap that trunk and lay that ring is before the ants ever find a road up in the first place, during the quiet part of the season when the tree is just leafing out. A barrier set early means a herd that never gets farmed, fruit that never gets stolen, a tree that spends all its strength on exactly what you planted it for. People who kept orchards long before there was a bottle on a shelf to reach for understood that the cheapest cure is always the one you set in place before you ever need it. That's just as true now as it ever was. I'll see you next time, when I'll show you how I keep cabbage moths off the garden greens without dusting a thing onto the leaves we actually intend to eat. Until then, go wrap that trunk, lay that ring, and come tell me what you're fighting. This is Naomi Yoder, and I thank you for sitting a while with me.